You know that gut-wrenching panic when someone's racking up charges on your stolen credit card? Now picture them building 25 luxury vacation cabins with it, on your land. I'm parked offshore, binoculars glued to my eyes, watching construction crews overrun my grandfather's private island like invaders at a beach party. Diesel smoke chokes the crisp pine air, silencing the loons that once ruled these crystal-clear waters. Some HOA queen in a gleaming white Escalade struts around like she's directing a blockbuster invasion. The Willowbrook HOA didn't just squat on my 47 acres. They slapped up a full-blown illegal resort, renting cabins to clueless families for $300 a pop. They pegged me as a pushover recluse who'd roll over. Big mistake. I've got Grandpa's ironclad 1953 deed stashed in a vault ready to unleash. I waited patiently. Let them install every plank, every septic tank, every bubbling hot tub. Why rush? The sweetest payback is watching your foes bury themselves with a $3 million backhoe. What would you do if intruders turned your sanctuary into their cash cow? Spill your revenge fantasies below. I'm tuning in from my boat tonight. Let me back up and tell you how this nightmare started. My name's Ezra Blackwood, and I'm what you might call a restoration specialist. I fix old houses that other contractors have given up on. It's honest work that pays the bills and keeps my hands busy, which is exactly what I needed after 20 years in the Navy. Pine Needle Island came to me the way most good things do, unexpectedly. My grandfather Silas was the kind of man who collected oddities, vintage motorcycles, Civil War medals, and apparently a 47-acre island in the middle of Lake Thornfield. When he passed in 2019, I inherited his modest lakeside cabin and discovered I was now the proud owner of what the locals called Hermit Island. Every morning, I'd sit on Grandpa's weathered dock with my coffee, listening to the gentle lap of water against the pilings and the haunting calls of loons echoing across the mist. The smell of wood smoke from his handmade stone fireplace would drift through the screen door, mixing with the sweet scent of pine sap that seemed to coat everything on the property. My steel-toed boots would creak against the dock's salt-stained planks as I walked to check the boat, a sound that had become my daily meditation. The island itself was pure Wisconsin wilderness, towering oaks and pines that had weathered decades of storms, their massive trunks creating a cathedral of green silence. I'd motor out there weekly, boots crunching through the thick carpet of fallen pine needles as I walked the old deer trails Silas had carved 50 years ago. No development, no electricity, just 47 acres of peace that $12,000 in annual property taxes couldn't begin to measure. My plan was simple: eventually build a small eco-retreat where burned-out city folks could remember what silence sounds like. Nothing fancy, just sustainable cabins that wouldn't scar the landscape. Then Priscilla Vanderhoff slithered into my life like a viper in Chanel. Picture the worst HOA president nightmare, then add a law degree and zero conscience. Priscilla was 58 with platinum helmet hair that hadn't moved since the Clinton administration and a wardrobe that cost more than most people's cars. She commanded a pearl-white Escalade bearing the vanity plate HOCO 1, a trophy she displayed like a conquering general. Her husband Roderick owned Vanderhoff Development Group, which controlled half the real estate deals in 3 counties. Together, they ruled Willowbrook Estates HOA like medieval lords, measuring grass with rulers and maintaining extensive files on every non-compliant mailbox and garden gnome within their domain. Our first collision happened at Thornfield Hardware in March 2023. I was buying marine rope when her cloyingly sweet perfume, vanilla mixed with pure entitlement, announced her presence before she even spoke. "You must be Mr. Blackwood," she purred with the confidence of someone who'd never lost an argument. "I'm Priscilla Vanderhoff, Community Standards Coordinator for Willowbrook Estates." I nodded politely. "Pleasure. We have a small boundary concern to address." She unfolded an official-looking survey map with theatrical precision. "Your island property appears to encroach on HOA-controlled marina waters. Will require a $500 encroachment assessment plus monthly marina access fees." I studied her fabricated survey, immediately noticing my island had mysteriously shrunk by 3 acres. "Ma'am, I have the original 1953 deed at home. My property boundaries are crystal clear." Her smile transformed into something that belonged in a shark documentary. "Mr. Blackwood, you'd be amazed how fluid property lines become when the right legal pressure is applied. The HOA has extensive resources for protecting community interests." She click-clacked away in designer heels, leaving me standing there with a growing sense of dread. Danny Kowalski emerged from behind the counter, shaking his head. Ezra, that woman's been circling like a buzzard for weeks. Yesterday, she asked me point blank if your island had any ownership vulnerabilities she should know about. What'd you tell her? Nothing. But brother, she's hunting. And I got a bad feeling you just became her target. April rolled around with the kind of deceptive calm that makes you think winter might actually be over. I was rebuilding a Victorian porch in town when Danny called with news that made my coffee taste like motor oil. Ezra, you need to get out to your island, now. 20 minutes later, I was cutting through morning fog in my little fishing boat, engine puttering like an old man's cough. As Pine Needle Island emerged from the mist, I spotted them immediately. 3 guys in matching polo shirts tramping around my property with clipboards and what looked like soil sample equipment. I beached the boat and marched up the bank, pine needles squelching under my boots with that distinctive wet crunch that meant spring runoff was still saturating the ground. Morning, gentlemen. Can I help you? The tallest one, a lanky kid with expensive sunglasses, barely looked up from his clipboard. Trevor Vanderhoff, Lakeside Environmental Consulting. We're conducting soil and water quality assessments for the Community Wellness Retreat Expansion Project. Vanderhoff. Of course. The apple doesn't fall far from the poisonous tree. On whose authority? Trevor pulled out an official-looking permit stamped with the seal of something called the Thornfield County Recreational Development Board. The letterhead was impressive. Gold-embossed logo, fancy typography, the works. County Environmental Impact Study. We have full authorization to proceed. I took the permit, noting how the paper felt too crisp, too new. My Navy training had taught me to spot forged documents, and something about this screamed amateur hour. Still, I played dumb. How long is this going to take? 3 to 4 weeks for comprehensive analysis, Trevor said, jabbing another metal rod into my grandfather's pristine soil. We'll be taking core samples, wildlife surveys, water contamination readings, standard procedure for development projects of this magnitude. Development projects? The kid had just revealed more than he intended. What kind of development are we talking about? That's above my pay grade, sir. I just test dirt. I spent the boat ride back feeling like I'd been sucker punched by my own naivety. The acrid smell of Trevor's equipment mixed with exhaust fumes from his generator made my stomach churn. Or maybe that was just the realization that I was being played. That afternoon, I drove straight to the Thornfield County Courthouse, a brick monument to bureaucracy that reeked of floor wax and decades of disappointed citizens. The planning office was tucked away in the basement, staffed by a tired-looking woman named Margaret, who treated every question like a personal attack on her existence. Thornfield County Recreational Development Board? She squinted at me over half-moon glasses that had seen better decades. Never heard of it. You sure? They issued permits for environmental testing on Pine Needle Island. Margaret's fingers flew across her keyboard with the efficiency of someone who'd been crushing dreams for 30 years. Sir, there's no such agency in our county system, and we have no record of any permits issued for your island. The ice in my stomach started spreading to my extremities. Can you check state records? Already did. Nothing. I remembered something my old Navy lawyer had told me years ago during a property dispute in San Diego. If someone occupies your land openly for long enough, usually 7 to 20 years depending on the state, they can actually claim legal ownership through adverse possession. Basically legal squatting with a statute of limitations. The bastards weren't just trespassing, they were laying groundwork for a complete takeover. Walking back to my truck, I realized I needed to document everything and take action fast before their fake environmental study became the foundation for something much worse. I spent the next 2 hours in the courthouse basement, digging through public records like an archaeologist hunting for bones. What I found made my vision blur with rage. 3 months ago, Vanderhoff Development Group had filed preliminary plans for Pine Needle Luxury Cabin Community, 25 rental cabins, expanded marina facilities, and a community recreation pavilion. The property owner was listed as Willowbrook HOA Community Trust. Complete fiction, but here's what made me want to punch a wall. The building permits had been approved. Some rubber stamp bureaucrat had green-lit the entire project based on forged documents. I drove straight to Priscilla's house, a beige McMansion that looked like suburban conformity had vomited all over 2 acres of what used to be farmland. She answered the door in tennis whites that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. Mr. Blackwood, what a pleasant surprise. I held up copies of the fraudulent applications. We need to talk. Her face cycled through surprise, calculation, and finally settled on predatory satisfaction. "I see you've been busy. Come in." Her living room looked like a furniture showroom where personality went to die. She poured herself wine at 3 p.m. and didn't offer me any. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Your nephew and his fake environmental crew are leaving my island. Today." Priscilla sipped her wine and smiled like a shark tasting blood in the water. "Mr. Blackwood, you should be grateful. We're transforming your worthless swamp into something the community can actually benefit from. Fight us, and you'll discover exactly how expensive good lawyers can be." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm educating you about reality. This project is happening with or without your cooperation. The only question is whether you want to be part of the solution or become another obstacle we need to remove." I left her house with my hands trembling, not from fear, but from the kind of white-hot rage that makes smart men do stupid things. That night, I installed trail cameras around the island's perimeter. If Priscilla wanted war, I'd document every battle. May arrived with the kind of weather that makes you forget Wisconsin has winter. But my mood stayed dark as January. I was installing crown molding in a century-old farmhouse when my trail cameras started sending alerts to my phone like a panicked heartbeat. The first photo showed a massive construction barge approaching my island at dawn, loaded with bulldozers and excavation equipment that belonged in a strip mine, not on pristine wilderness. By the time I raced out there in my fishing boat, they'd already unloaded and started their assault. The sound hit me first, chainsaws screaming through morning air like mechanical banshees, drowning out every bird and bug that called my island home. Then came the diesel smoke, thick and black, coating my throat with the taste of environmental destruction. The sweet smell of fresh-cut pine that I'd loved my entire life was now tainted with exhaust fumes and the metallic tang of heavy machinery. I beached my boat and stormed up to the biggest guy on site, a mountain of a man directing traffic with the authority of someone who'd never been told he was wrong. His hard hat read, "Big Mike Torino, Site Foreman." "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I shouted over the machinery. Big Mike didn't even look annoyed. He pulled out a court document with official seals and signatures that looked more legitimate than my birth certificate. "Pine Needle Community Development Project authorized by Willowbrook HOA Board Resolution 2023-07. You the property owner?" "Yeah, I'm the property owner, and this is trespassing." He handed me another document, a restraining order that made my blood freeze. "Judge Morrison signed this yesterday. Prohibits property owner interference with lawfully permitted construction activities." "Sorry, pal, but you need to stay back." I stared at the injunction, my hands trembling slightly. Either Priscilla had corrupted actual judges, or she was a master forger. The raised seal felt real under my fingertips, warm from the morning sun. "Who's paying you?" I asked. "Thornfield Community Builders. 25 luxury cabins with full utilities, good steady work." Big Mike's expression softened slightly. "Look, I got 12 guys depending on these paychecks. We're just doing our jobs." That's when it hit me. These weren't Priscilla's accomplices. They were her victims too. That afternoon, I met Rebecca Santos in her downtown office that smelled like leather-bound law books and the kind of expensive coffee that costs more than most people's lunch. She had sharp eyes that seemed to catalog every detail before filing it away for future use. "They're weaponizing mechanics' liens," Rebecca explained after reviewing my evidence. "It's actually brilliant in a sociopathic way." She showed me the relevant statutes, and my construction background filled in the horrifying blanks. If someone improves your property and doesn't get paid, they can legally claim ownership of whatever they built. It's designed to protect honest contractors, but Priscilla had turned it into a legal nuclear weapon. "Here's their endgame," Rebecca continued. "They finish the cabins using this shell company, Thornfield Community Builders, which has zero assets. When the project fails, dozens of legitimate subcontractors automatically lien your island for unpaid work. You'll spend decades in court while your property sits in legal purgatory." The cruel genius made me want to put my fist through her office window. Even if I proved the permits were fraudulent, I'd still be stuck with liens from contractors who'd done honest work based on those fake documents. "What if I let them finish everything?" I asked. Rebecca nearly choked on her coffee. "That's financial suicide. You'd be letting them build millions in structures on your land. But then I'd have clear damages to sue for. Instead of worthless half-built foundations, I'd have completed buildings to use as evidence of willful trespass." She studied me like I'd just suggested cliff diving without a parachute. "Theoretically, yes. treble damages for willful property crimes, 3 times actual construction costs. But you're gambling everything on winning a complex legal case against people who've already demonstrated they can forge court documents. I thought about my grandfather's island being turned into suburban hell and Priscilla's certainty that I was too poor and powerless to fight back. Maybe it was time to prove her wrong. Set up the paperwork, I told Rebecca. But don't file anything yet. Let them build their own prison. Over the next 3 weeks, I watched my paradise transform into a construction zone that would make a Vegas developer weep with pride. Big Mike's crew worked with desperate efficiency, racing to finish before their fake permits could be questioned. The environmental carnage was breathtaking. They'd bulldozed wetlands where great blue herons nested, rerouted streams that had flowed unchanged for centuries, and installed septic systems that would contaminate the lake's pristine waters. I documented everything while fighting the urge to chain myself to the remaining old-growth oaks. But my secret weapon emerged during lunch breaks with the subcontractors. These were local guys, honest contractors trying to feed their families who had no idea they were building on stolen land. 3 weeks without pay, complained Pete Kowalski, Danny's cousin handling electrical work. Thornfield Community Builders keeps promising checks are coming, but my suppliers are getting antsy. If this job goes south, I'm bankrupt. By month's end, all 25 foundations were poured, and Priscilla launched her marketing offensive. Professional website, social media blitz, advanced bookings at $300 per night. She was so confident in her victory, she'd started spending money she hadn't stolen yet. The trap was set. I just had to resist the urge to spring it too early. June brought the kind of heat that makes asphalt bubble and tempers explode. But nothing prepared me for the marketing hurricane Priscilla unleashed on my stolen property. The Pine Needle Luxury Retreat website launched with professional photography that would make a Vegas casino marketing team jealous. Drone footage showcased the cabin construction from carefully chosen angles that hid the environmental carnage, while glossy copy promised authentic wilderness luxury and exclusive lakefront experiences. But the real slap in the face came when I discovered she was selling founding memberships to Willowbrook residents for $2,500 each. These weren't just rental reservations. She was promising 10-year guaranteed access to my property, complete with priority booking and discounted rates. I sat in Murphy's Tavern that evening, nursing a beer that tasted like liquid betrayal while scrolling through her Facebook posts. The smell of fried fish and stale cigarettes couldn't mask my growing nausea as I watched her advertise my grandfather's island like she'd personally discovered the New World. 23 families bought memberships already, Danny informed me, sliding into the cracked vinyl booth across from me. Words spreading through the HOA like wildfire. Some folks are talking about refinancing their houses to get in on this investment opportunity. Investment opportunity. She was selling shares in stolen property to fund the very theft she was committing. The circular logic would have been impressive if it wasn't making me physically ill. That's when I made a decision Rebecca would later call either brilliant or certifiably insane. I created a fake Gmail account and booked a cabin for Labor Day weekend under the name Robert Chen. The confirmation email arrived faster than a pizza delivery, complete with a detailed amenities list that read like a luxury resort brochure. Private hot tub, granite countertops, marina access, guided fishing tours, all on my property, all without my permission, all at $300 per night. But buried in the legal fine print was something that made my coffee taste like battery acid. Pine Needle Retreat is fully insured through lakeside property protection for guest safety and liability coverage up to $2.5 million. I called Rebecca immediately. She took out insurance on my island. Using what documentation? Rebecca's voice had that sharp edge it got when she smelled blood in the water. That's what we need to find out. Rebecca's private investigator worked faster than a bloodhound with a fresh scent. Within 48 hours, we had our answer. Priscilla had used the same forged property deed to secure a massive insurance policy. If someone broke their neck falling off one of those illegal hot tubs, the insurance company would pay out millions, then discover they'd been defrauded and unleash federal investigators who'd make IRS auditors look friendly. "Congratulations," Rebecca said with grim satisfaction. "Your property theft case just became a federal insurance fraud investigation. We're talking FBI jurisdiction, RICO charges, organized crime statutes, the whole prosecutorial Christmas tree." Meanwhile, construction accelerated like Priscilla could smell the legal noose tightening. Big Mike's crew started working 18-hour days under portable floodlights that turned my peaceful island into something resembling an alien landing site. The constant drone of generators mixed with the sharp crack of nail guns, creating an industrial symphony that probably had every loon within 5 miles filing for divorce. I started buying drinks for subcontractors at Murphy's Tavern, listening to their mounting concerns while pretending to be just another curious local. What I learned made me realize Priscilla wasn't just robbing me. She was setting up a financial house of cards that would crush dozens of working families when it collapsed. Combined, we're owed over $180,000, Big Mike confided during one beer-soaked confession session. Electrical, plumbing, roofing, concrete work, all of us floating payroll on promises and prayer. If this job tanks, half the independent contractors in 3 counties go under. That's when I made another decision that convinced Rebecca I'd suffered a complete mental breakdown. I offered to pay their outstanding invoices directly. You do that? Big Mike's weathered face showed the kind of shock usually reserved for lottery winners and tornado survivors. Why would you stick your neck out for us? Because you're getting screwed just like I am. Difference is, I can survive the financial hit. Your families can't. Word spread through the contractor network faster than news of free beer. Within 10 days, I had signed agreements with 4 major subcontractors. They'd provide testimony about fraudulent permits and safety violations in exchange for guaranteed payment regardless of Thornfield Community Builders' fate. It was expensive insurance, but it bought me something Priscilla couldn't forge. Honest witnesses with nothing to lose and everything to gain by telling the truth. My friend Carl finished documenting the environmental crimes that were making my stomach churn. Septic systems dumping untreated waste into protected watershed, wetlands bulldozed without permits, endangered bird nesting areas destroyed for scenic views. Each violation carried automatic $50,000 daily fines once federal authorities got involved. By late July, the first completed cabins were passing fraudulent inspections from Marcus Webb, Priscilla's brother-in-law, who apparently thought building inspector meant rubber stamp operator. The structures were actually well built. Big Mike ran an honest operation, but they sat on my land like architectural evidence of organized crime. Priscilla announced her grand opening for Easter weekend 2024, complete with celebrity chef and live music. She was planning a media circus on my stolen property. The woman was building a criminal empire, one illegal cabin at a time. Too bad she had no idea I was documenting every nail and every lie, for the reckoning headed her way like a legal tsunami. August hit like a sledgehammer wrapped in humidity, but the heat outside was nothing compared to the fire Rebecca lit under Vanderhoff Development Group's financial records. Her law office smelled like burnt coffee and the kind of desperation that comes from lawyers working 18-hour days. But what we discovered made my hands shake worse than my first day under enemy fire. They're not just broke, they're catastrophically bankrupt, Rebecca announced, spreading bank statements across her conference table like a medical examiner displaying evidence of a financial murder. Vanderhoff Development Group owes $1.8 million to suppliers and contractors from previous projects. They haven't made a business loan payment in 4 months. I stared at the red-inked numbers, my brain struggling to process the magnitude of their desperation. The papers felt damp under my fingertips from the nervous sweat that had been my constant companion since this nightmare began. So if the cabin project fails, they lose everything. House, cars, business, other properties, the entire Vanderhoff empire gets fed into a legal wood chipper to satisfy creditors. But that revelation was just the appetizer. Rebecca pulled out another file that made my vision blur with rage. Those pre-booking deposits from innocent families planning lake vacations, $412,000 collected so far. Please tell me it's an escrow. Rebecca's expression could have frozen Lake Superior in July. Gone. Credit card payments, luxury purchases, overdue bills, they've spent every penny. Even if they wanted to refund deposits, they couldn't. The money's been consumed by their financial black hole. The full horror crystallized like ice forming on a windshield. Priscilla wasn't just stealing my land. She was running a massive Ponzi scheme using my island as bait. Hundreds of families had paid for dream vacations that would never exist, on property that was never legally available, to fund a company bleeding money faster than a gunshot wound. It gets worse, Rebecca continued with the grim satisfaction of a prosecutor building a death penalty case. They received $300,000 in PPP loans, supposedly to pay Pine Needle construction workers during COVID. They used every dollar for personal expenses and island development. Federal crime number 3, and we hadn't even reached the insurance fraud yet. But the nuclear bomb was hidden in banking documents that Rebecca's forensic accountant had decoded like some kind of financial Rosetta Stone. The $2.5 million construction loan from First National Bank was secured using your forged deed as collateral. The air conditioning suddenly felt inadequate. Meaning what? The loan officer who approved it is Patricia Ming, Priscilla's sister. She bypassed every safety protocol because it was family business. When the bank discovers the collateral is fraudulent, both sisters face federal conspiracy charges that carry 20-year sentences. The scope of their criminal enterprise was breathtaking. This wasn't suburban HOA overreach. It was organized crime involving multiple banks, government agencies, and federal programs. Priscilla had constructed a criminal house of cards so elaborate that one strategic push would topple everyone involved. They can't back down now, I realized aloud. Too many people will lose money and demand answers. Exactly. They're trapped in their own web. The only escape is finishing the project and hoping rental income covers their debts before anyone notices the fraud. Rebecca leaned forward with the expression of a chess grandmaster who'd spotted inevitable checkmate. Which brings us to your moment of truth. We can destroy them immediately with current evidence, or let them finish and watch the consequences multiply exponentially. A completed project means $3.2 million in structural damages plus environmental cleanup costs. Bigger construction equals larger financial penalties and longer prison sentences. Plus, your contractor allies get paid through eventual settlements instead of eating massive losses. I thought about those innocent families who'd trusted Priscilla with their vacation money, about Big Mike's crew working their asses off for paychecks that might never come, about my grandfather's island being violated by criminals who thought they were untouchable. They've dug themselves into a grave, I said finally. Let's see if they're smart enough to stop digging. Rebecca smiled like a predator tasting blood. Perfect, because I just discovered Marcus Webb has been taking cash payments for fake inspections. The state attorney general is going to love our evidence. The trap was perfected, baited with their own greed, and they were already inside. Now we just had to wait for them to trigger their own destruction. September arrived with the kind of crisp air that makes you believe in fresh starts. But I was planning something that would finish the Vanderhoffs permanently. Rebecca's law office had transformed into a war room that reeked of takeout Thai food, burnt coffee, and the peculiar smell of justice being served cold. We need a coordinated strike, Rebecca announced, spreading documents across her conference table like a general planning the invasion of Normandy. The papers rustled with the dry whisper of legal doom. Hit them simultaneously with everything: property trespass, environmental violations, contractor liens, insurance fraud, bank fraud, and federal conspiracy charges. My A-team had assembled like some kind of legal Avengers squad. Rebecca Santos brought 15 years of property rights warfare and a personal hatred of bullies that made her smile when discussing the Vanderhoffs' upcoming destruction. Her sister detective Maria Santos specialized in financial crimes and had already coordinated with FBI agents who were practically drooling over our evidence like kids eyeing Christmas presents. Danny Kowalski provided intelligence that would make the NSA jealous. His marina position offered front-row seats to every construction barge and supply delivery, while his network of fishing buddies tracked worker schedules and equipment movements with the dedication of obsessed sports fans. Carl Brennan, my retired EPA contact, had documented environmental crimes that would make Superfund lawyers weep tears of prosecutorial joy. 23 separate Clean Water Act violations, he announced, with the satisfaction of a birdwatcher spotting a rare species. Unpermitted septic systems dumping raw sewage into protected watershed. Each violation carries automatic $50,000 daily fines once federal enforcement kicks in. The math was staggering. Over $4 million in environmental penalties alone, and climbing every day those illegal systems operated. But the real masterstroke was our financial warfare strategy. I'd secured a $500,000 credit line using my mainland property as collateral. This money would pay contractors directly, removing their financial incentive to support the Vanderhoffs' increasingly desperate lies. My Navy experience had taught me something Priscilla clearly never learned. The best battles are won before the enemy realizes they're fighting. Every contractor I paid became a witness for our side instead of a potential ally for theirs. Here's what most people don't understand about RICO statutes, Rebecca explained while sketching legal flowcharts that resembled football plays drawn by a caffeinated genius. Prove organized criminal conspiracy, and every participant becomes personally liable for total damages regardless of corporate shields. Priscilla and Roderick won't hide behind shell companies or bankruptcy protection. Under racketeering laws, their personal assets, house, cars, bank accounts, retirement funds, that ridiculous Escalade, would be seized to compensate victims. They'd built their criminal empire using other people's money, and those same people would get repaid from the Vanderhoffs' liquidated lives. Carl had contacted Jennifer Wu, an investigative reporter whose environmental exposés had toppled county commissioners and sent a state senator to federal prison. She's been tracking HOA corruption patterns for 3 years, he explained. Once we trigger legal action, coordinated media coverage ensures prosecutors can't ignore the case due to political connections. Maria outlined our criminal coordination timeline with military precision that would have impressed my old commanding officers. FBI Financial Crimes Unit executes search warrants the same morning you file civil suits. Immediate asset seizure prevents offshore money transfers. State environmental regulators shut down all island operations pending EPA investigation. Media gets exclusive access to document raids and arrests. But my favorite element was the community protection plan. I'd set aside $100,000 to reimburse innocent families who'd lose cabin rental deposits when the project imploded. Rebecca was coordinating with state consumer protection attorneys to file class action suits, ensuring victims got compensated while criminals got prosecuted. The goal isn't just revenge, I told my team during one late-night strategy session, the conference room thick with the smell of determination and stale pizza. It's ensuring honest people don't get crushed when we demolish this house of cards. The technical preparation read like a prosecutor's wet dream. Carl's environmental damage assessment filled 3 binders with photographs, soil samples, and water contamination readings. Each day those illegal septic systems operated added another $50,000 in federal penalties. They'd been dumping waste for 4 months and counting. Rebecca had researched similar nationwide cases, discovering that courts routinely awarded 2 to 3 times actual construction costs for willful property theft. With completed structures valued at $3.2 million, we were targeting damages approaching $10 million before adding environmental fines and federal penalties. Criminal sentencing is equally devastating, Maria explained with cop-level satisfaction. Federal conspiracy carries 5 to 20 years. Bank fraud adds another 20. Environmental crimes trigger automatic sentencing enhancements under federal guidelines. We're discussing prison terms that will outlive their mortgages. Our coordination plan was surgical. Legal action would commence the day before Priscilla's Easter grand opening. Maximum public humiliation and media coverage. 200 families would arrive for non-existent cabin rentals while TV crews covered what they assumed was a community success story, and federal agents would execute search warrants as tourists watched from their pontoon boats. The poetic justice was intoxicating. Priscilla had spent months constructing her own destruction, one illegal nail at a time. Those 25 luxury cabins would become prosecution exhibits in her federal trial. Easter weekend was 6 months away, plenty of time for her to add more felonies to her growing collection. October brought the kind of weather that makes leaves explode into fiery brilliance, but Priscilla was about to learn what real flames could do to a person's life. She'd apparently realized I wasn't some toothless hermit ready to roll over, because suddenly my existence became her full-time demolition project. It started with my business reputation getting carpet-bombed by fake reviews that appeared overnight like digital herpes. Ezra Blackwood is a con artist who took my money and vanished, read one particularly creative work of fiction. Left my kitchen renovation half-finished with exposed wiring and mold damage. Another masterpiece claimed I'd used counterfeit materials that caused structural collapse and extensive property damage. The reviews were diabolically clever because Priscilla had researched my actual projects and crafted believable lies that would fool anyone without inside knowledge. Within 10 days, my 5-star business rating had crater-dived to 2 stars, and 4 Willowbrook residents had canceled contracts worth $43,000. But the real knife in the gut came when the state contractor licensing board called with news that made my morning coffee taste like liquid betrayal. Anonymous complaints had been filed alleging I was working without permits, using unlicensed subs, and violating safety codes. Complete fabrications that triggered an automatic investigation threatening my license. Mr. Blackwood, explained the licensing investigator during his surprise visit, clipboard in hand like an executioner's axe, these are serious allegations. Until we complete our review, I'm strongly recommending you suspend all current operations. I watched 15 years of honest sweat equity circling the drain, while Priscilla's illegal cabins rose like middle fingers pointed directly at justice. The woman had weaponized bureaucracy with the efficiency of a missile guidance system. The harassment escalated beyond professional assassination. Vince Torino, a private investigator who looked like he'd learned surveillance techniques from watching too much Netflix, started following me with all the subtlety of a neon sign. He'd photograph me buying groceries, tail my truck to job sites, and accidentally bump into me at Murphy's Tavern while asking probing questions about my recent behavioral changes. "Folks around town are concerned about you, Ezra," Vince mentioned during one of these staged encounters, his voice dripping fake sympathy like syrup from a broken dispenser. "Making wild accusations about legitimate business projects. Maybe professional counseling would help." The gaslighting was masterful and infuriating. She was constructing a narrative that painted me as some paranoid recluse having delusions about innocent HOA activities, setting up an insanity defense for when I inevitably snapped and did something violent. Meanwhile, construction on my island had accelerated to environmental warfare levels. Crews worked 18-hour shifts under industrial floodlights that turned my peaceful sanctuary into something resembling a maximum security prison yard. The mechanical symphony of generators, nail guns, and heavy machinery created a noise pollution assault that probably had every owl within 20 miles filing for divorce. The smell of diesel exhaust mixed with sawdust and industrial adhesives had replaced the natural pine and wildflower scents that had defined my island for half a century. Every breath felt like inhaling progress wrapped in cancer, but I documented everything while playing the role of a broken man accepting defeat. Every sabotage attempt, every fake review, every threatening conversation got recorded and filed with Rebecca for our eventual legal nuclear strike. The mini-twist came when Roderick approached me at Thornfield Supply with what he clearly believed was an irresistible offer. His Mercedes prowled into the lumberyard like a predator hunting wounded prey, expensive chrome gleaming against the industrial backdrop of forklifts and sawdust. "Ezra, let's end this foolishness," he announced, climbing out wearing a suit that cost more than most people's cars. His cologne, something that smelled like money and moral bankruptcy, mixed with the honest scents of treated lumber and diesel fuel. He produced an envelope thick enough to stop bullets. 200,000 cash to resolve this boundary misunderstanding, fair payment for the eastern portion of your island where our facilities happen to be located. I stared at the money while my hands literally shook with rage. This bastard was trying to purchase stolen property from the person he'd stolen it from, like buying a TV from the guy whose house you'd robbed. "You're offering to buy my own land back from me?" "I'm proposing a mutually beneficial business arrangement." When I didn't immediately grab the cash, desperation leaked through his practiced smile like water through a cracked dam. $350,000, final offer. The 75% increase revealed exactly how financially desperate they'd become. Their criminal empire was hemorrhaging money faster than a severed artery, and they needed my cooperation to stop the bleeding. I recorded every word while pretending to consider selling my soul. "I need time to think." "Don't think too long, Ezra. Real estate markets can change overnight." That evening, Rebecca added attempted bribery to our expanding criminal portfolio. Witness tampering, conspiracy, fraud. At this rate, they'll qualify for organized crime sentencing guidelines. But Priscilla's panic had reached weapons-grade levels. She'd convinced the HOA board to file formal complaints with the Township Council, claiming I was threatening community development through increasingly erratic and potentially dangerous behavior. The Township Council, bought and paid for with Vanderhoff campaign contributions, voted to investigate my disruptive activities and threatened business license revocation if I didn't cooperate with legitimate community progress. Political corruption so blatant it would make a Chicago alderman blush. But every threat, every lie, every abuse of power was being cataloged for the reckoning approaching faster than they could imagine. Priscilla thought she was strangling me slowly. She had no idea she was tying her own noose. November arrived with the kind of bitter cold that turns your breath into ghosts and your hope into ice. But Priscilla's desperation had reached supernova levels of destructive energy. The FBI raid on Vanderhoff development offices had apparently convinced her that subtlety was a luxury she could no longer afford. The character assassination campaign went full nuclear holocaust. Fake social media accounts multiplied like cancer cells across Facebook and Nextdoor, spreading lies so elaborate they probably required a team of professional fiction writers. Ezra Blackwood was dishonorably discharged from the Navy for violent episodes and substance abuse, read one particularly vicious fabrication. Multiple neighbors report threatening behavior and possible weapons stockpiling. Another creative masterpiece claimed I was under federal investigation for tax evasion and disability fraud, while being banned from construction sites for sexually harassing female workers. The lies were so sophisticated they included fake documentation and manipulated photographs that would fool anyone without access to truth. But the real sucker punch came when the Thornfield Gazette ran a front-page hit piece that made my morning coffee taste like liquid betrayal. "Unstable contractor threatens community safety," screamed the headline above a photo of me looking deranged while confronting Priscilla's construction crew. Paul Hendricks, the newspaper editor whose mortgage was probably held by Vanderhoff Development, had crafted a character assassination that belonged in a journalism hall of shame. The article painted me as an increasingly dangerous recluse whose mental deterioration posed a clear threat to innocent community volunteers and their families. Local law enforcement has been alerted to monitor Mr. Blackwood's escalating behavior patterns, the article concluded with the kind of journalistic integrity that makes real reporters consider career changes. The public opinion warfare was devastatingly effective. Former customers literally crossed streets to avoid me. The post office clerk suddenly couldn't find packages with my name. Even my barber started claiming he was booked solid whenever I called for appointments. I was being systematically erased from my own community, like some kind of social excommunication designed by experts in psychological warfare. Meanwhile, Priscilla had unleashed legal predators that made corporate sharks look cuddly. Caldwell, Pierce and Associates, a firm specializing in destroying small businesses through financial exhaustion, delivered a cease and desist letter thick enough to stop bullets. "Our client demands immediate cessation of your harassment campaign against lawful community development," the letter roared with legal authority designed to terrorize anyone without deep pockets. "Continued defamatory activities will trigger a 7-figure lawsuit for business interference, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and malicious prosecution." The beautiful irony was that her own lawyers had no idea they were representing federal criminals. She'd lied to them with the same casual efficiency she used on everyone else, building legal strategies on foundations of pure fiction. Construction had accelerated to the point of environmental terrorism. Big Mike's crews worked around the clock under industrial floodlights that transformed my peaceful island into something resembling a maximum security prison camp. The mechanical symphony of generators, welders, and heavy machinery created a noise pollution assault that probably violated several international treaties. The smell had evolved beyond construction odors into something approaching chemical warfare. Diesel exhaust mixed with paint fumes, industrial adhesives, and the acrid smoke from burning debris created an atmospheric cocktail that made breathing feel like a deliberate health hazard. The sweet pine scent that had defined my childhood memories was now buried under layers of industrial contamination. But then came the mini twist that changed everything. Maria's FBI contacts leaked information that made our property theft case look like amateur hour compared to the federal crimes they'd uncovered. They found the offshore accounts, Maria whispered during our clandestine meeting at Murphy's Tavern, her voice barely audible over the jukebox playing some country song about broken hearts and broken promises. "Roderick's been laundering money through Cayman Islands banks for 3 years. We're talking international financial crimes that will make federal prosecutors fight over who gets first crack at prosecution." The Vanderhoffs weren't just stealing my land. They were running a criminal enterprise that crossed international borders and involved money laundering, tax evasion, and bank fraud on a scale that would make organized crime families jealous. Priscilla's panic response was to file a retaliatory lawsuit claiming I had sabotaged legitimate construction through false statements to government officials and was seeking court injunctions to prevent continued interference with lawfully completed development projects. The lawsuit was built on perjured testimony and documents so obviously forged they looked like elementary school art projects, but it created another legal front designed to drain my resources while she raced toward her Easter deadline. Her community division strategy was fracturing Willowbrook like an earthquake. 60% of residents supported her project, while 40% began questioning why cabins were being built on property with disputed ownership. 3 HOA board members resigned rather than endorse what they privately called Priscilla's criminal enterprise. By December, all 25 cabins gleamed with luxury appointments that would make 5-star resorts weep with envy. Granite countertops, commercial appliances, therapeutic hot tubs, total investment approaching $3.6 million in structures that would soon become federal evidence exhibits. Priscilla announced her Easter grand opening with the confidence of Napoleon marching toward Moscow. Celebrity chef, live entertainment, national media coverage. She was planning a victory celebration on my stolen property that would be witnessed by hundreds. She had no idea she was constructing her own public execution platform, one illegal nail at a time. Easter Sunday, April 1st, 2024. The date would be burned into Thornfield County history like a brand marking the day justice finally showed up to the party. The irony of April Fool's Day wasn't lost on me as I watched 200 unsuspecting guests arrive by chartered pontoon boats for Priscilla's Pine Needle luxury retreat grand opening. The morning air carried the scent of blooming wildflowers mixed with diesel fumes from the flotilla of boats converging on my stolen island. Local TV news crews had positioned themselves strategically around the marina, cameras ready to capture what they assumed would be a heartwarming story about innovative community development. Priscilla stood on the main dock wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, her platinum hair sculpted into a helmet that could deflect artillery shells. She gripped a wireless microphone like a weapon of mass deception, her smile so bright it could guide aircraft to safe landings. "Welcome to Pine Needle Luxury Retreat," she announced to the growing crowd, her voice echoing across water that had once been peaceful. "This magnificent development represents the very best of community cooperation and shared vision for sustainable tourism." The crowd applauded politely while I approached in Danny's fishing boat, my waterproof briefcase containing the original 1953 deed that would detonate like a legal nuclear bomb. Rebecca sat beside me, her laptop bag loaded with enough evidence to convict a small army of criminals. Carl carried his environmental documentation like a priest bearing holy relics, while Detective Maria Santos wore civilian clothes that couldn't quite hide her cop instincts. Priscilla spotted our approach, and her smile flickered for just a moment, like a neon sign with faulty wiring. She probably assumed we were arriving for some kind of surrender negotiation or last-ditch plea bargain. The TV cameras swiveled to capture our landing, sensing potential drama with the instincts of sharks detecting blood in the water. I stepped onto the dock and walked directly toward Priscilla's microphone, the crowd parting like the Red Sea as whispers spread through the gathering. The wooden planks creaked under my boots with a sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the sudden quiet. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, taking the microphone from Priscilla's suddenly nerveless fingers, "I'm Ezra Blackwood, and this is my island." The crowd's collective gasp was audible even over the gentle lapping of water against the dock. TV cameras zoomed in as I pulled out the original deed, its yellowed pages crackling in the morning breeze. "Every structure you see behind me was built on my private property without permission, without legal authority, and without proper environmental permits," I announced, holding the deed high enough for every camera to capture. "This entire development is a criminal enterprise built on stolen land." Priscilla's face cycled through shock, rage, and desperate calculation before settling on the kind of pale terror usually reserved for condemned prisoners. That's impossible," she stammered into a backup microphone someone handed her. "We have all the proper permits and documentation." Rebecca stepped forward with her laptop, its screen visible to the news cameras. "Mrs. Vanderhoff, these are the forged documents your development company used to obtain building permits. The Thornfield County Recreational Development Board that issued your environmental permits doesn't exist. It's a fictional agency you created using counterfeit letterhead." The crowd's murmur rose to a buzz of confused voices as people began pulling out their phones to record what was rapidly becoming the most spectacular public meltdown in county history. Carl moved to the microphone with the authority of someone who'd spent 30 years making corporate criminals squirm. "Every septic system on this island was installed without EPA permits in a protected watershed. Each violation carries $50,000 in daily fines, and they've been operating for 6 months. A reporter from Channel 7 pushed forward with her microphone. "Mrs. Vanderhoff, how do you respond to these allegations?" Priscilla's composure cracked like ice in a spring thaw. "These are baseless accusations from a mentally unstable man who's been harassing our community for months." That's when Detective Maria Santos stepped into camera range, her badge catching the morning sunlight like a beacon of approaching justice. "Ma'am, I'm Detective Santos with the State Police Financial Crimes Unit. You're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, money laundering, and environmental crimes." The crowd erupted into chaos as 3 unmarked police boats emerged from behind nearby islands, their blue lights flashing like 4th of July fireworks. Federal agents in windbreakers marked FBI began boarding the main dock while Priscilla's face went through every shade of white known to interior decorators. "This is impossible!" she shrieked as Detective Santos approached with handcuffs. "We have lawyers, we have permits, we have rights!" You have the right to remain silent, Maria replied with professional satisfaction. I suggest you use it. But the real crowd pleaser came when Roderick attempted to flee in his speedboat, only to discover that Lake Patrol had been waiting offshore like patient fishermen. His arrest was captured by no fewer than 6 different news crews and probably 100 cell phone cameras. Big Mike pushed through the crowd to shake my hand, his weathered face split by a grin that could power the entire county. Mr. Blackwood, I want to thank you for making sure we got paid. Not many people would stick their neck out for working folks like us. The crowd of vacation renters looked confused and worried until I stepped back to the microphone. Everyone who paid deposits for cabin rentals will receive full refunds from my victim compensation fund within 48 hours. You're not responsible for crimes committed against you. The applause was thunderous, echoing across the water like a natural celebration of justice finally served cold, with a side of poetic revenge. The aftermath hit faster than a Wisconsin thunderstorm in July. Within 48 hours, Federal Judge Patricia Morrison had ordered immediate cessation of all island operations and sealed the cabins pending environmental assessment. Priscilla and Roderick were denied bail after prosecutors discovered they'd already moved $2 million to offshore accounts. Flight risk doesn't begin to describe people with private jets fueled and ready. The vacation renters got their money back exactly as promised. Watching relief flood across those families' faces, parents who'd saved for months to give their kids a special getaway made every dollar worth it. One grandmother from Milwaukee actually sobbed when I handed her the refund check, her weathered hands trembling as she explained this trip had been planned for her grandchildren's spring break for 3 years. By autumn, the legal dominoes fell like a controlled demolition in slow motion. The Vanderhoffs pleaded guilty to federal charges that read like a criminal law textbook: conspiracy, fraud, money laundering, environmental crimes, bank fraud, and racketeering. 8 years in federal prison plus $4.2 million in restitution. The civil lawsuit settled for $3.8 million, treble damages for willful trespass that would have made Grandpa Silas pound his fist on the table with satisfaction. Environmental cleanup took 6 months and cost nearly $1 million, every penny extracted from seized Vanderhoff assets. Watching those illegal cabins get demolished and hauled away felt like watching malignant tumors being surgically removed from something I loved. The sound of sledgehammers crushing granite countertops was better than any symphony ever composed. But the real transformation happened in Willowbrook itself. The HOA dissolved faster than sugar in boiling water, replaced by a democratically elected neighborhood association with bylaws requiring independent legal review of any decision involving more than $5,000. 3 corrupt township council members faced recall elections. 2 resigned before voters could personally fire them into unemployment. The honest contractors who'd been victimized by Priscilla's scheme experienced business booms that changed their lives. Big Mike hired 8 additional workers and launched Transparent Construction Consulting, helping homeowners verify permits and contractor credentials. Pete Kowalski expanded his electrical business into 4 counties and painted Honesty Pays on his new fleet of work trucks. My island finally fulfilled Grandpa's original vision. Settlement money funded the Pine Needle Environmental Research Station in partnership with State University's ecology program. The facility now hosts sustainable tourism workshops, watershed protection seminars, and my personal favorite, property rights defense training, weekend courses teaching homeowners how to fight HOA overreach and contractor fraud. The inaugural retreat was HOA Survivors Anonymous, a support group for neighbors victimized by petty tyrants wielding clipboards and measuring tapes. 73 people attended from 9 counties, sharing horror stories that would make Stalin blush, then laughing together as they healed from years of bureaucratic terrorism. The crown jewel became the Blackwood Justice Fund, scholarships for working-class kids pursuing legal careers. Too many good people get crushed by corrupt authority because they can't afford representation, I told the scholarship committee. Our first recipient was Big Mike's daughter, Sarah, studying paralegal certification with dreams of becoming a property rights attorney who protects families from institutional bullies. Our annual Pine Needle Transparency Festival has become legendary throughout the region. Local contractors, environmental educators, and whistleblower attorneys gather for pulled pork, bluegrass music, and Rebecca's keynote speeches about fighting institutional corruption. Last year, we raised $94,000 while the smell of barbecue smoke, mixed with pine needles and the sound of honest laughter, echoed across water that runs clean again. Blackwood Restoration now specializes in helping homeowners battle HOA harassment and contractor fraud, turning my nightmare into expertise that protects other families. Rebecca made partner and built a thriving practice around property rights law, keeping Priscilla's booking photo on her wall as a reminder that justice might be patient, but it's thorough. The island healed beautifully. Native plants returned, invasive species disappeared, and this spring bald eagles nested in the old-growth pines for the first time in 20 years. Nature's acknowledgement that the sanctuary was truly protected. Every morning, I still sit on Grandpa's dock with coffee, listening to loons call across crystal-clear water. The sweet scent of pine sap and wood smoke has returned, erasing every trace of Priscilla's industrial contamination. Sometimes I reread comments on our viral story, 4.2 million views and counting, from people worldwide sharing their own victories against corrupt authority. Drop your HOA nightmare story in the comments below. The most outrageous one gets featured in next week's Karen Stories episode. Subscribe to Karen Stories for more tales where ordinary people demolish petty tyrants. And remember, always verify property ownership before signing contracts. Never underestimate the power of patience, documentation, and Grandpa's ironclad deed. Justice served cold, with environmental protection and community healing on the side. Exactly how Grandpa Silas would have wanted it.